hold you all up. So let me share our deck for today. All right. All right, Pavitra, do you have the recording going? Okay, cool. All right, well, welcome everyone to our meeting for tonight, our Money and the Media Financial PR meeting. We'll start off with some e-board introductions. I'm Taylor and I'm our chapter president.
I'm Juliet Stas. I'm the faculty advisor for this lovely group.
I'm Sabrina Fitch-Minton. I'm the VP of DE&I.
Nipper isn't here. I'm Melania Tochka. I'm the VP of Professional Development.
I'm Christina Millett. I'm the VP of Membership.
I'm Holly Gemby. I'm the VP of Events.
I'm Pavitra and I'm the VP of Social.
And I'm Giselle. I'm the VP of Communication.
And Niffer had to take the night off tonight so she'll be back.
She's our VP of Digital. And if you're interested in any of the positions that we mentioned, we just opened up tonight our e-board application. So a lot of those positions are open and all you have to do is be a dues paying member. You don't have to have been in the club a certain amount of time. So just ask us if you need information on if you're a member or not. And the application is due in February.
Awesome. Well, I guess we'll start with our.
I think Melania has a couple announcements about some opportunities.
Okay.
Yeah. So first, I'd like to remind everybody. No problem. All right, so I'd like to remind everybody, if you identify as a student of a racial or ethnic minority or anything like that, I would advise you to apply to the Michelle Flowers Diversity Fellowship program. You can receive up to a $3,000 scholarship and an internship. And applications for that close soon, so please be sure to apply to that. Right, and then when it comes to job opportunities and internship opportunities, lots of stuff is opening up right now. So Kramer Krasselt is hiring, so is McDonald's. I believe the Golan postgraduate internship is also starting up, and then also includes the Wienermobile and more. You can check out our Slack channel and opportunities for students for links to applications, and be sure to turn on your LinkedIn notifications for job alerts with companies that you're interested in, because lots of agencies are hiring right now. Again, some pictures from one of our graduates, Nikki, who was like an all-star and participated in the Wienermobile like hot dogging adventure. So if you'd like to connect with her, we can also give you her contact information. And then tonight, right after this meeting at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time or 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, PRSSA National is hosting a Twitter chat, so you can go ahead and engage with them on their PRSSA National Twitter account. Basically, they'll just be posting stuff to talk about. I don't know what the topic for today is, but it's a great way to engage with students across the country. Lots of other people are like participating, so it's a great way to like connect with other people via social media. And then this is something that's really like just started in the works. Like we literally talked about this yesterday, but I'm working with the 2 other Midwest district ambassadors on possibly having a networking event for PRSSA chapters in the Midwest. And we're eventually going to have a networking event for that probably within like March or February. So just stay tuned for that.
Speaking of networking events, Depaul's district conference will be taking place a month from today. At this conference, you will have the opportunity to network with professionals from, the biggest agencies like Edelman, Golan, and many, many more you get, while also like developing ways of building your portfolio. And we're inviting schools from across the Midwest to participate. So it will be a lot of fun. And you will get more emails about this from me this week, as we will be determining the modality of the conference.
All right, and now we'll move on to Bree as she introduce our guest for today. Or Bree or Melania.
Sorry. Wonderful. I will introduce Matt Regis first. Matt Regis is PhD, is a tenured associate professor in the College of Communication at Depaul University, where he serves as the founding director of the Masters in Professional Communication program. He has 20 years of professional experience in financial communications and business publishing positions. Matt earned a PhD in mass communications from the University of Florida and an MS in management, a BS in business administration, both from the University of Central Florida. He teaches courses at the intersection of business and communications, as well as core public relations course. Matt's scholarly research and interests include corporate communication, financial literacy for communicators, media relations, business journalism, and agenda setting, agenda building processes. He is the co-author or co-editor with his colleague Ron Cope of several books. He is also a New Orleans native, which I know he's very proud of. Matt is passionate about good food, traveling, politics, and public affairs, sports, and the stock market. We all should be like Matt.
Sabrina, could you introduce Jack for me as well? I'm just about to get to my computer. Sorry about that.
Absolutely. And Jack Miller, public relations account executive with a strong copywriting focus across all forms of media, including print and digital media, social, web, and video script writing. He's a fast and dedicated, enthusiastic learner, producing quality work for clients who in 2 industries. He had no prior background in agriculture and financial services. He has a strong passion for social justice and helped to spearhead his current employer's approach to diversity and inclusion in the workplace. This work builds on the LGBTQ and Asian American activism and advocacy work Jack engaged in during college. Outside of work, Jack walks on the Chicago lakefront, enjoys pop music from all over the world. He enjoys learning about astrophysics and chess. And every so often, he'll recreate a recipe that manages to impress his parents, who are both chefs. Okay. So, and we all should be like Jack. All right. So tonight we are going to be talking about financial PR. What is financial PR? And I'm going to put out a generic definition of it, and our guests are welcome to refine that as they see fit. What is financial PR? It is a department of a company or an independent agency or firm that communicates the financial business dealings of a company to all of its publics in the best light, while also maintaining honesty and openness. And they do this in areas such as hedge funds, private equity, banks, and insurance. And I'll open the floor up to Matt and Jack, and we will start our questions. Can you each tell me, starting with Jack, how did you get into financial PR? Is this something you dreamed about when you were in junior high school? Jack?
It is definitely not something I dreamed about in high school. I did not know that public relations existed when I was in high school. Um, so I actually do something, I guess, adjacent to the definition that you laid out. So I work in financial services PR. So PR on behalf of like insurance agents and financial advisors. So it is promoting their business, but I'm not like talking to shareholders. I'm talking to consumer and trade media, just like a lot of PR, a lot of other PR people. Um, and as far as how I got into where I am today, um, so my current role at GNS, I was hired by GNS straight out of college as a postgraduate intern. And I got started with content creation in my internship. And my financial services client, which is MDRT, the Million Dollar Roundtable, which is a professional association for financial advisors. That was an account that happened to need an intern at the time. So that was one of the accounts I got assigned to, and it just went from there. I really enjoyed the work. It was new and exciting to me. It was very different from anything I had been taught about in college. And I just have had a really good time. And I've been on the account ever since.
Awesome. How about you, Matt?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here this evening, and thanks for having me. It's fun to see some familiar faces and some new folks. I can never say no to you all, as you probably know. And for those of you that are joining as guests that may not be members yet of Depaul PRSSA, I will just say, as a professor that's been here now for, I don't know, a dozen plus years, this is some of the most driven, motivated, curious, collaborative. These are folks that you should get involved with as they are rising young leaders, and they will help you in terms of friendships and networking and jobs and careers and everything else. So that's my plug there. A couple different thoughts. So I think it's a pretty good definition of financial PR. I'm going to throw some other terms out there. Sometimes this is called financial communications, or FinCom would be another term that you can Google and you'll see. Jack pointed out, which is really important, FinCom and financial PR usually deals with a range of stakeholders, of which business media and trade media and pitching out to them and other influencers is part of it. Another term I want to give y'all is investor relations. So IR, the king stakeholder usually for IR, is very much just like it sounds, investors. So current or prospective investors, and then folks that influence shareholders and bondholders. So those would be like Wall Street analysts. And so IR usually has its own department or function, definitely if it's a publicly traded company. Financial PR or FinCom, those folks usually sit on in-house teams in a corporate communications or corporate affairs department or team. On the agency side, you're going to find practice groups and areas that might be called financial PR or FinCom. You also sometimes will have groups that specialize in also providing IR support. One thing I want to point out that's really unique about Jack's agency is GNS is very much focused on business to business or B2B clients. So a lot of the agencies you probably have as guest speakers is business to consumer. So it's consumer facing brands. GNS is really interesting that they're B2B, and then they specialize generally in a couple different industries. So ag and financial services. And one thing I want to say about B2B, because it's not probably the first thing most young people think of, right? Y'all think of like, I want to represent Nike, or I want to represent McDonald's, right? You're not thinking about business to business brands. You can get experience working in B2B. You can work with some senior people and get access to like C-level executives generally more quickly, because business to business companies usually have smaller comms and PR teams. Does that make sense? And so my guess is Jack's getting exposure to more senior folks than he would if he's like an AE working on what might seem cooler consumer stuff. The last thing I would say for me, I was like a kid that my dad got me into the stock market. So literally, I would wake up in the morning back in the Stone Age when there was newspapers, and Juliet may know this, and I would like look at the comics, and then I would look at like the stock tables and like the business section, and my dad would kind of walk me through stuff, and I was like, this is like the coolest thing, right? Like now, you know, sports gambling is, we can all do that, and that's kind of bizarre to me. And now you have like Robinhood and apps on your phone, but I was just always fascinated by that I could buy a little piece of like these different companies that you all can experience in your lives.
Awesome. Next question, Matt, can you answer this first? What is distinct about financial PR as opposed to all of the other sectors in PR?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I promise I'll keep this one shorter than throw it over to Jack. It has its own language and its own vocabulary. And some of you have heard me say this before and have taken classes with me. So you have to be comfortable with learning. Business is almost like learning a second language. And all industries have unique language and terminology. I'd say what's important for all of you to think about, even if you don't want to work in FinCom or IR or on B2B, money is the language of decision makers, whether it's nonprofit CEOs of nonprofits or public companies. And so I would challenge all of you to get more comfortable with these business concepts and ideas, because you're going to work for and with, I promise you, with MBAs and accountants and finance educated folks for the rest of your lives. And all of you have awesome ideas and great experiences to bring to the table, but you do need to be able to package and understand the thinking of business people and collaborate effectively with them. Jack?
Yes. Everything, Matt, that you just said, I 100% agree with. To add on to that, I would say that financial PR is probably a little unique in terms of like the political diversity of people you're going to come across. PR is obviously a very liberal industry. Like PR practitioners tend to be more liberal. And in a lot of cases, the clients that PR professionals have also tend to liberal side. This can even be true in more conservative industries like agriculture, which I can speak to from experience as well. Finance is not like that. You are going to, if you go into financial PR or financial services PR or anything adjacent to the finance field, you're going to be working with people from across the political spectrum. Sometimes that means knowing when to hold your tongue and just being able to work with people who are going to say things and express opinions that you really, really disagree with. It is a life skill. There's obviously a big cultural conversation right now about when and where we should or should not speak up when we politically disagree with people. If you're working in financial PR, the answer is going to be you should not speak up a little bit more often.
Oh, that's valuable.
I was just gonna say, I put in the chat, really great point. And traditionally, people that work in financial services, that banks, think about it, banks, insurance companies, investment management, mutual fund companies, hedge funds, even to some extent. Yeah, they're definitely on the political spectrum, and just their whole philosophy, they're going to be more conservative in general with how they look at things. I've had a long-term relationship with Discover locally, Discover Financial Services, and it's always a little bit of a gut check for my students because we're in Chicago and we're very much in a blue bubble. And while my political persuasion is very much progressive and liberal, I'm always challenging students to get an hour or 2 hours outside of Chicago and open their brains to, trying to understand at least the perspectives of people that may not agree with you fully. And Discover always drives that point home. for in interactions and engagement with them, because they will challenge, let's say, some of the corporate activism and advocacy stances that I think DePaul students are, it's like inside of us. Like, it's a natural thing that y'all want to do, and it's good to have some people kind of gut checking it the other way.
Yes. And, the part of the reason why I said that you might need to hold your tongue a little more if you go into finance PR is because the clients won't. They have absolutely no qualms about sharing their political opinions. And to what Matt just said, like, I've worked with financial advisors who just, after 5 minutes of speaking on a phone with me, like, they knew me for 5 minutes. I think one of them told me that he thought that Social Security was going to bankrupt the country. And another person who talked to me in 5 minutes in, she said that she thought the hospitals were inflating COVID deaths in order to get more money from the federal government. And also, in fairness, on the other side, I've also had a financial advisor who, I think about 15 minutes into speaking with me, told me that she was a big fan of Antifa. So literally the whole spectrum will be expressed to you in your line of work.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting.
I'd
I'm so
say on
glad.
that part of it is you're dealing with some very, it's like if you do legal PR or you work in accounting, Jack's coming across people that are very self-confident. I don't know how else to say that. They're used to being bosses, financial advisors, partners in law firms, partners in accounting firms. These are people that are used to being the leader and the decision maker, and for better or for worse, often thinking that their opinion is correct, which is quite a skill to be able to successfully work with them.
Okay. Well, that brings me to the next question. What courses and other skills should students acquire to become an excellent candidate for this sector, for the PR or for the financial PR sector? What skills should, if they're really interested and serious about it, what should they be trying to acquire?
Jack, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So to start, I can give you all an example of a course I took that I really appreciate taking in college. I can give you an example of a course I wish had been available. The course I took in college was a business analysis. We learned how to use this to evaluate sales cycles and the financial impacts they would have on companies. And as Matt alluded to earlier, like, a course like this will teach you how to speak in the language of your clients, because at the end of the day, most clients, a lot of the clients you work with on a day-to-day basis, they will get it. They will know how PR works. Their bosses are going to be concerned about sales. How is the company doing? How many transactions are happening? Can you prove that XYZ led to more revenue and more gross income? And so learning, even if you have absolutely no desire in the world to ever do a sales job or go into business analysis, knowing how to work with people who live in that world is really important. A course that was not available to me that I really wish had been, and I hope is available to you at DePaul, is a project management course. The project managers at GNS are angels sent to us from heaven, and they keep us on track and they keep us sane, and they are entirely underappreciated in their work. If any of you want to go be a project manager, you will be that angel. And I wish that I had been able to take a course on project management in college, because I think that would have been really valuable for me. And then as far as internships go, I'm going to be honest with all of you. I did not have the finances to afford an unpaid internship when I was in college. And unfortunately, when I was in college, those were the internships that were available most of the time. If you can afford an unpaid internship, that's great for you, not for society. I think unpaid internships are terrible. But if you can't afford an unpaid internship and you can't get a paid internship, something that I think is really valuable is over the summer, just get an office job. It can be an administrative role. It can be a part-time role that you have on campus. get a job where you work in an office in a white collar setting and you learn how that works. As was alluded to at the beginning of this, both my parents are chefs. That's obviously a very blue collar background. I had no idea how offices worked until I got an office job the summer after my sophomore year of college. And I think that was a really, really invaluable experience for prepping me on how working for a PR firm would go.
Jack packed so much good information just now for you all in that response, and I can see some of y'all are taking notes. So Jack doesn't know this, but my better half is a senior IT project manager, and we're in a loft, and I have this, I'm hoping you can hear that. You said that project managers are angels from heaven. I agree. I would say that you're seeing more and more on position calls. This is interesting. This is a conversation. She and I think Juliet knows this, co-published a journal article on introducing agile thinking and Scrum concepts for strategic communicators. And I'm glad to share the piece with any of you. I presented it to CCOs that are regional trustees of the Institute for PR a couple months ago. And it's just interesting that you see project management now as dedicated positions on communications and PR teams, both in-house as well as agency side. And you see it listed even in position calls that are not going to have project manager in the title. So I totally could not agree more with Jack on that. In an ideal world, if you're interested in FinCom, I would say minor in business, or at the very least, challenge yourselves, virtually go across the street to the business school, take a marketing class, take a management class. Don't be afraid if you don't nail it with an A or even a B, but just getting the experience and perspective and the thinking is really invaluable. I guess I'd give a little plug of one class I teach each year. Some of you know is public relations and advertising entrepreneurs. And so one thing I would say is entrepreneurship and management classes may not be, let's say, as intimidating, and you can still learn good stuff about business, and it may not be as hardcore as a finance or an accounting class. Does that make sense? Where like including my eyes may glaze back into my head. So we do have a nationally ranked entrepreneurship program. There is classes that are, there's literally a minor now Depaul has launched for non-business majors. Entrepreneurship will give you a taste of management, finance, marketing, all the different functions and areas of business. So you'll learn about business models. So that's something to think about. And the last thing I would say is before this evening, I happened to write a book chapter a couple of years ago for this book, Public Relations, Competencies and Practice. That's a buddy, Carolyn May Kim, out at Biola University. And it's a good book worth picking up. And I've shared the PDF, and it's, you know, I think it can be shared with all of you. It's Financial Communications and Investor Relations. It's a chapter I wrote that's on careers, actually, within this area. And it's only from a couple of years ago. And so I found the PDF earlier, and I think that'll be shared out for all the attendees.
And really quickly to bounce off one of the things you said, Matt, because you mentioned a management class. That is absolutely something that in retrospect, I wish I would have taken, because no one tells you this about, I mean, and this applies to a lot of industries, but no one tells you this about PR. Everyone is managing everyone. No matter what your role is in a PR firm, and this applies to FinCom, this applies to any kind of PR, you are managing up and you are managing down. I have set deadlines for the CEO of my company. And knowing how to do that is really, really valuable. Like knowing how to be firm about, hey, this is when this needs to be done. And also at the same time, let me know if we need to work something out in terms of what can be reprioritized. Saying that to someone who's like 3 levels above you can feel really intimidating when the first few times you do it. And it's like, sometimes it feels like, oh, I wish I'd gotten training on this, even though I'm only an AE. So if you can take that management class and just learning how to work with other people, like absolutely go for it.
Yes, that was really good. Managing up and managing down. That's something you don't.
And across. You need to be a good colleague with your peers as well, and not just a brown noser to the higher ups.
Okay. Okay. And our next question before we open it up to the general body. For those who may be unsure as to what niche of PR they want to be in, why might financial PR be an attractive specialty?
It is, to me at least, I've always found it intellectually challenging and interesting. And it's like solving puzzles and games. And I think what I've had this conversation many times with alums actually, that including at big agencies that will rush into consumer PR. And then they get to a certain point after a few years of doing the zillionth new consumer product launch and planning events and this and that. And they realize that they would like to get involved at a higher level in influencing not just words, but actual behaviors and actions. And the C-suite and the boardroom and the corner office. And we'll then look to actually transfer into or move over to like a corporate affairs practice or team or like FinCom. Because careers are long, and you want to continue to grow and be challenged. And I think you also want to have a big impact. And I've always found that FinCom and IR is a place where you can really do that.
A couple of things I'd add on to that. As someone who works in financial services PR, if you don't know a lot about personal finance and how to manage your money, after a year of working in financial services PR, you will. You will learn pretty much everything you ever wanted to know and more about how to manage your finances. And also one thing that's really valuable to me in my current company is if you go into like finance PR and investor relations and financial services, there seems to be more room earlier for people to get away from media relations if you don't really like that part of the job, if it's not your favorite. And I say this as someone who I am not a huge fan of media relations. I like content creation and copywriting, and I really don't like the part where I have to send it to an editor and hope that they like it. And if that's not your favorite part of PR, if you go into consumer, it can feel like you're going to be in media relations forever. And honestly, for some people they are, because they really love it and they thrive off of it. But for me, it's nice that even now as an AE, I'm able to start getting away from media relations because it's not the part of the job that I look forward to every day.
Okay, awesome. We're going to open it up to the general body. If anyone has any questions, you feel free to ask away. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not cutting anybody off. I have a question to start out. Jack, could you tell us a little bit about your day-to-day, or maybe a favorite project? I mean, those are two different things. I guess you can pick either one.
I'm going to be honest with you. My day-to-day looks very different from day to day. I definitely experience those weeks where it's like on some days I have no meetings, and then some days in the same week I have 6 hours of meetings. As far as a favorite project goes, something that I actually just got to wrap up is with overseas partners in East Asia. And our client, because our client is a global organization. So I'm being told my internet connection is unstable, so I apologize if I drop off the call. Something I was just able to a campaign I was able to just finish up was the launch of a survey in Japan about like Japanese consumers' financial priorities and what they want out of their finances for the coming year. Which A is really cool because, you know, I get to learn about something that's totally new to me. I got to work with a lot of people, and it was nice that I got to see the president of my clients give a presentation to Japanese media that I made for him. So that was really, really nice and awesome that I got to do that. And also it was nice because it went well. We got good results out of it, and that's always nice when that happens.
I was just going to say that I love that Jack's talking about Asia as one of his favorite projects. And I would encourage, I think Depaul does a pretty good job at this. And I think some of you know, I'm involved with global engagement and virtual exchanges and helping support international students. I want to give a shout out to the South China Morning Post, which is the English language publication out of Hong Kong, owned by Jack Ma, one of the world's, if you've heard of Alibaba, and if you haven't, you should know about Alibaba, because in many ways, Asia is really driving and influencing the future of business and society in the world. And I think too many of us have like a Western kind of US centric viewpoint, which is not so much what's really driving, I think, the decades ahead. So South China Morning Post, because I only speak English, not always well, but everything's in English.
Okay. Did anyone else have any questions? Okay.
I think Christina was raising
I
her
saw
hand.
Kate had her hand up too.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that.
Is it Kate? Sorry.
Hi, yeah, that's perfect. I was wondering what type of channels are used with business to business versus like business to consumer, if that makes sense.
It is, funnily enough, almost all the same channels are used in B2C. You're just talking to a different target audience. I will say that the big difference is that when we go to our media partners, we're usually working with trade media. So trade media is like media outlets that are set up for B2B purposes. So like as someone who works in financial services, I think one of the biggest ones, for an example, in the US is an outlet called Insurance Newsnet. And it is an online news outlet for insurance agents about news in the insurance industry. So it's a go-between for insurance agents and their employers, and the SEC and other federal regulators, and professional associations like my client. So, and then as far as other things, like we use social media, we use the same social media platforms that everyone else does. I think our standards for what counts as a high engagement may be a little lower than that for a big time consumer brand. We mentioned Cranes in the chat, and I've personally submitted stuff to Cranes Chicago before. And like, yeah, other than that, is the same basic branches of like you have your earned media, your own media, your paid media. We work with advertorials sometimes and everything else. You are just speaking to a different kind of audience.
I have a question, which I'm not sure if either of you guys would have a great answer for, but I'm really interested anyway. As far as financial services communication, do you think there's a big difference in in-house financial services communication outside of, stakeholder relations versus like what you do with being through an agency and doing like financial services communication, like working like at Discover versus working like with Discover, that type of thing?
I would say yes, for many reasons. The big one is that when you are working in-house, you like, I want to make sure I say this right. When you are working in-house, the fact that you always have two audiences is a lot more in your face. And what I mean by that is no matter where you work in PR, you have two audiences, your target audience and the employees of your client. The way that the employees of your client interpret your PR work is equally important to how your target audience interprets your PR work, because as Facebook and so many other companies have now shown us, all it takes is one disgruntled employee who has enough access to enough documents to make life very painful for your clients if they feel like dumping some internal docs on the internet. And when you are working in-house, you have a lot more exposure to that employee audience because you are an employee. You were talking about your coworkers at this point. You know them, you're friends with them, you have happy hours with them. So that I think is in the forefront of in-house practitioners' minds a lot more than people like me, where like, yes, I know that my client has employees. Them as people very well. I don't speak to a lot of the employees very often other than my like client contacts. So it's harder for me to say like, oh, this is how our clients' employees are going to react to this or that.
I predict Jack is going to continue to get promoted. He's a smart young guy that has picked up on the subtleties of the different audiences that the different influences that in-house people have to juggle. I would just say it really depends with agency partners of how they're used, right? So there's agency partners that do more of what might be called arms and legs. And so that might be the not so glamorous of sort of pitching out and the media relations side of things. And frankly, what's more tactical. There's also shops that are going to come in more as strategic counselors and advisors and actually be helping shape programs and initiatives, which is, it sounds like at least some of the work that GNS is doing. I would say one of the big things that come out of COVID has been the greater focus by both agencies, but particularly in-house teams on employee comms and internal communications. And external comms has always gotten a lot of attention and focus, but there's been this, it was happening before COVID through employee activism, right? And the voice of the employee getting stronger and more organized, view digital and social. But COVID, we're in this kind of great resignation, turnovers off the charts. It's really gotten the highest levels of organizations are all aware of this. And I'm seeing them put a lot more resources and attention into employee engagement. And there's always been agencies that specialize in that. And so a big name locally would be Gig and McDonald, but a lot of agencies have bigger agencies have practice areas focused on that. So it's something to keep an eye on and I think be aware of.
And to add on one more thing to that, if you want really intellectually engaging and challenging environment for PR, a lot of these, there are a lot of industries right now that have historically been more conservative, like finance and agriculture and some others, that are in this moment where their employees are now a lot more liberal than their customers are. And that is creating some really big communication challenges for these brands who are having to figure out how they satisfy their employees who want Pride Parade sponsorships and statements about Black Lives Matter, while their customers are like, what are you doing to lower our taxes? And that if you want, an intellectually stimulating environment where you get to deal with those kinds of challenges, like an industry like finance is actually a really good fit at this moment.
Yeah, Jack is in industries that traditionally have been business is business, and we don't need to comment or take a stand on social issues and social matters, social, political. And the reality is like, well, you're not going to attract or retain the best talent. You're going to be second or third class because that's just not where your generation and the generation, I think, one older than you, that's not where they're at. And so it is an exciting time to see. And I think y'all might have guessed that I know lots of folks in financial services. I've had the conversation, Northwestern Mutual, so based up the road in Milwaukee, literally kind of nicknamed the quiet company, and their ERG group some years ago. So their employee resource group, their LGBTQ employee resource group, this is soon after Pulse nightclub, right, was like proposed this idea that then the CEO approved to light up their iconic headquarters building with the pride flag. And I know the senior people in comms there, that came together in like 72 hours between a small group of people and then facilities. And that might not seem like a big deal for some companies, but for like a company like Northwestern Mutual that, think about this, has financial advisors all around the US in all kind of red and blue, right, and purple places, they knew that that was going to, wrongly tick off certain advisors, and it was employees driving that, and they did it, right? And then they received all the benefits of that from particularly their headquarters employees.
I was curious, while we're on this topic, have you all ever had any like interesting ethical dilemmas with stuff like that, where, I don't know, you're like talking to one audience and you're like, this makes no sense for your brand or something like that?
Yes, I have. So the unfortunate state of affairs is, as I'm sure many of you know, PR as an industry is behind the times when it comes to D&I, and we're, as an industry, we're doing a lot of work to catch up, but we have a ways to go. Finance, it's like a whole other world. It's like you're looking at them, and it's like you're standing on a timeline and you're looking back at the 80s. And there have been quite a few situations where we have been told, no, you can't say that. No, you can't run that in a press release, or sorry, I know that we approved this earlier, but we heard from higher up that they don't want this to run, around some of these D&I issues. And that has been very frustrating. I'll be honest about that. There have also been some wins. We have been, especially last year, we were able to get our client to start talking about D&I more. And I think one of the big highs that I personally got to experience was I got to work with one of my clients' members, who is a Black financial advisor down in Tennessee. And I got to place an article for him in a trade publication where he got to talk about, like, what are things that financial advisors need to know about Black clients that they're just not as out with white clients, or not worry about per se, but like, what do you need to know in order to work effectively with Black clients that doesn't apply as often to white clients. And we also got to talk about times that he is the financial services, and how he's had, I think the one story that stands out was he had a white woman come up to him at a financial services conference and tell him how women had it harder than anyone in financial services, even though there were 500 white women in this big conference room and about 50 advisors of color. And so ethically, it is an interesting place because you have to be okay with working with an industry that is behind and is more behind than PR. But I would say that the next few years, we are going to see a lot of catching up out of necessity. That doesn't always feel good when it's out of necessity and not out of, like, better hearts and better minds. But it is progress, and there's room to push clients right now that did not exist a few years ago.
So the one thing I would add on to that, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Warren Buffett. Warren's from the Midwest, from Omaha. He's one of the viewed as sort of one of the most famous investors of all time. And he has something called the newspaper test. It also could be called the mom test. And it's a good guideline just in general for all of us as professionals, really any industry. I've always been taught that ethics is really about what you do when no one's watching, and doing the right stuff. What Warren says is the newspaper test is, would you feel comfortable with the decision you made, putting it on the front page of the newspaper and having your mom or your folks actually read it and learn about it, as kind of a guiding principle? And I like trying to simplify stuff, and that doesn't always work, but that works a lot of times if you think about it. I can tell you that I've used that kind of over the years to try to to try to guide me through some sort of gray. You're going to deal with gray in your careers. It's reality of people trying to see sometimes how far you will go, whether it's a client or a supervisor. And so newspaper test or mom test.
And to add on to that, the earlier that you set your boundaries in your career, the more effective that boundary setting is going to be. I think that there are a lot of people who come in, not just in PR, I think there are a lot of people who get out of college, no matter what their major is, and they get their first job and they're so scared that if they are too assertive, that they'll be fired, frankly, or that they'll be punished in some way. And so they don't set boundaries. And then 6 to 8 months later, they feel terrible because if you don't set boundaries, no one else in like corporate America is going to set boundaries for you. So they feel awful 6 to 8 months in because they have no work-life balance or because they have done something that they are uncomfortable with. Set boundaries at the beginning of your job when you get your job. If you don't want to work on a certain client, be upfront with the company that you're working with right away. I mean, when I started at GNS, GNS does not, I don't believe, work with these clients anymore. But when I started at GNS did work with oil and natural gas. And I told GNS when I started that I would not do work with oil and natural gas because I wouldn't feel good about it. And I wouldn't be able to do good work for them because I would feel terrible about the work I was doing. And stuff like that, where it's like, you don't to, if you feel icky about doing something for a client, it, like Matt said, it's very gray a lot of the time. And sometimes your managers are basically going to say, hey, I'm really sorry, but we are going to have to do this. At least get it in writing from your client that they asked you to do this, so that it is very much like, no, our clients told us. And other stuff like that. When you, the earlier you set your boundaries, the earlier that you stand up for yourself, the better that is going to go, the better you will feel about your job. And the more, honestly, the more respect that other people will have for you.
Wow. Oh, this whole session has been just chocked full of things, new information, frankly. But to wrap things up, the last question, and you guys have been giving us advice all night, but what bit of especially impactful advice would you give to a student who is interested in financial PR?
I would say my last bit of advice is that in order to succeed in financial PR, it is really important that you have both the self-awareness and the self-confidence to say you don't know how to do something. Because you're not going to learn everything you need to learn in college, no matter what job you go into, but especially a field like financial PR, where this is niche enough that most colleges don't really have classes on this. So being able to embrace learning on the job, being able to embrace the fact that, like, no, you are not going to walk out of college with all of the knowledge that you need to succeed. That will really help you in financial PR, being able to be comfortable with asking good questions. I can tell you right now that I have not stopped asking questions that sometimes feel basic. And I am 3 years into my job as of this month. So yeah, just being able to embrace that mentality of, like, you are always learning, there's always more to learn, and you are never advanced enough or highly ranked enough or old enough to not say, I don't know this.
I love that, Jack, because the reality is we're always learning. This is a continual growth and learning business. You're not going to just get your bachelor's degree, your master's degree, or your PhD or whatever credential. You don't have all the answers. Everything's constantly changing. Be intellectually curious. And I thought about what Jack was saying, be comfortable with the uncomfortable. If that's not you, then maybe financial PR, financial communications is not the best thing for you. But if you are agile and adaptable and curious, continuous learner, it's a good place to be. The last thing I would say, I'm a big booster for expand your media diet. So generally PR students are great with, I think those of you know me, like I love pop culture. I love current news, national news, international events, but like start reading WSJ, like read the Wall Street Journal, read the New York Times business section, read what the decision makers in Chicago, that's Crane Chicago business, whether it's Lori Lightfoot or the CEOs of companies. So just expand your news diet. But I just want to say again, it was a lot of fun, and kudos to this group. A lot of times, financial PR, FinCom kind of gets ignored as a topic. So not surprisingly, y'all are on the ball as usual. So thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you, Jack. One last thing, I know this information was so valuable, and I know the ones that tuned in are going to want to reach out to you on LinkedIn. Is that going to be okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, always do personalized LinkedIn invites, and your success rate back is going to go off the charts.
Great.
Totally agree on the organized labor piece too. That's another thing, and shame on all of us. You're in Chicago, so you're the heart of organized labor and the tension from the founding of the city between the bigwigs and giving workers a voice.
What Haymarket Square refers to, go to the Chicago History Museum and find out.
The reason, my last parting thing as an old Discover Chicago instructor, you celebrate in part Labor Day because of the rail strikes down in Pullman on the far south side. So, I mean, it's from Haymarket to Labor Day.
Yeah, also like Matt said, thank you so much. I really appreciate the chance to be here. This was really fun, and I'm happy I got to meet all of you.
Well, we really appreciate you guys, and thank you so much. And
yes, thank you so much. Let me share just a couple of closing remarks for today. So we just want to share about our next upcoming meeting, our last official meeting for the quarter on February 7th. We're having a Super Bowl campaign smackdown. So it's going to be really fun. We're going to make our own campaigns, just get really creative with it. So look out for that. And I'll stand this for a minute. Please join our Slack channel if you're not already on it. There are so many opportunities that we share, not just in here, but ones that come up in between our meetings. So please join that if you're not already on our Slack channel. And then join here if you are interested in watching our other meetings or connecting with us on socials. So thank you again, Jack and Matt, for imparting all your wisdom on us. I actually learned a lot, and I had no clue about financial services or financial PR today, and I'm actually really intrigued. Surprisingly, after 4 years in PRSSA, I learned something very new, so I'm very excited. So thank you.
Thank you all very much. This was fun. Happy Monday evening. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks
you
for coming.